Many of you are familiar with this initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative. If you are not familiar, we have another video talking about this initiative in detail, so make sure you go and check it out. Today, let's look at this initiative from another angle, an interesting relationship between international trades and political peace. We know that the Belt and Road is related to the economy. It has also been given a certain political meaning since President Xi Jinping's speech in Kazakhstan in 2013. As well as this, the public discussed whether the Belt and Road can alleviate the recent tensions and challenges in certain areas. So, to what extent does the economy affect political peace? Can the Belt and Road Initiative bring real benefits to world peace through the economic developments? Let's start with the trade peace theory and see what the relationship between the economy and politics is. Liberals insisted that the country's trade relations will lead to international peace. This thought that came from Montesquieu in the 16th century, maybe even earlier. They believed that trade between the two countries could promote peace and create common interests. The common interests make it harder for the two countries to resolve conflicts with war. As political scholars have pointed out, this value is arising from the trade acts as a hostage between any conflicting countries. If the hostage is of considerable value and is threatened by war, then the sovereign state is no longer completely independent and autonomous. Since the benefits of trade are likely to be lost in war, the common expectation of loss can serve to prevent conflicts between trading partners. To put it more bluntly, if people on one side of the border have assets or valuable customers on the other side, they are less likely to support the destruction of those assets or trading partnerships, and more likely to support the idea of peace. Until the First World War, the school of realism in international relations was gradually emerging. People thought that the economy belonged to low-level politics and the security belonged to high-level politics. Low-level politics and high-level politics could not be compared. Power was the primary pursuit of the state. Research that had been continued for hundreds of years on the link between trade and peace was postponed until the 1970s, when the oil crisis and stagflation led to turbulence and war between countries. Since then, the relationship between the economy and politics has once again been raised by the public. Trade theory is an important aspect of neoliberal institutionalism. It believes that the distinction between high-level politics and low-level politics is no longer obvious, and the interdependence between countries will reduce the war crisis to a certain extent. The embodiment of the economy is the trade peace theory. So, why would people think that trade will promote peace? Well, let's take a look at the logic behind trade leading to peace. Number 1. The international community is in anarchy. As Helen Milner says, the concept of anarchy has been placed at the centre of international politics. This is the logic starting point of all the international relations theories. The anarchy of the international community means that in an international system dominated by sovereign states, there is no legal authority or power to prevent the use of force by any country. In this situation, lack of trust is another consequence of an international system under anarchy. There is always the possibility of violent clashes and even wars, as there is no power to stop it. Trade can ease the consequences of these unregulated and untrustworthy relationships between countries and be the lubricant when conflicts arise. Number 2, the state is rational. In the concept of economics, it assumes that the state is an economic people, and all countries are acting rationally. Any activity taken by the state is based on rational decisions. In other words, the state wants to get the most benefit from the least cost of action. For example, Trump and Kim Jong-un recently held a historic meeting in Singapore, as they believed the meeting would benefit more than a war in the current situation, the decision of which comes from rational thinking. As the economic man, a rational country will choose to maximize its own interests. If in case a country believes that the war can lead to maximised benefits, there is a high chance a war breaks out, and vice versa. Number 3. Trade strengthens the links between countries, deepens understanding and cooperation between countries that will reduce the information asymmetry. Information asymmetry comes from the non-disclosure of information. Under such circumstances, it is difficult for the country to distinguish whether the other party is a friend or a hungry wolf in sheep's clothing, so it is easy to break out of war for security reasons. Economic cooperation can provide more choice mechanisms for conflict resolution, as well as strengthen the dialogue between two countries to a certain extent. The reality of the decline in war is particularly evident in Europe, where this trend has been around for hundreds of years. Where there was an average of 30 wars per decade in the 15th century, there were only about 10 per decade in the last century. For a long time, European sovereign states have turned away from conflict and tend to resolve their differences in a non-violent manner. Number 4. War will lead to the interruption of trade between countries. Because conflicts and wars are the last resorts that two rational countries can take when dealing with international issues, after the outbreak of war, the volume of trade will be greatly reduced or even completely interrupted. There is nothing like war that has such frustrating effects on international trade. From an economic point of view, cross-border trade brings more benefits to the choice of peace, thus increasing the cost of war. If there is a war, it is possible that all the previous investments by a country will be destroyed. The situation is similar for the countries that are being invested in, which brings more employment and promotes economic growth and national welfare. In the event of a war, the cost will increase greatly. Not only will the money invested in other countries be lost, but the decline in the welfare of citizens due to unemployment will also be included. One statistical piece of evidence of trade peace theory is, in 1980, Solomon Pollaczek used the microeconomic theory to interpret the relationship between international trade and conflict. He used international trade to measure the degree of economic interdependence and found that the conflicts between countries with the most trade contacts are also the least. On average, every doubling of trade between two countries will simultaneously reduce the hostile behaviour by 2%. For example, in 2017, China and South Korea were politically conflicted because of the THAAD issue. For those of you who are not familiar, THAAD is short for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. This is an American anti-ballistic missile defense system. A large number of Chinese residents boycotted Korean goods, causing economic pressure on South Korea, which in turn forced South Korea to reconsider whether or not to continue the decision of the THAAD process. While the modern state can no longer benefit from plundering trades between the richest countries, it can ensure that powerful nations have incentives to prevent other countries from participating in conflicts. This is because fighting will jeopardize the trade ecology, not just the countries that participate in the war, but also the other countries that benefit from the trade. Of course, the trade peace theory also has its problems. For example, the economic interests of the two sides are not always equal, or one party in the trade relationship is over-reliant on the other side's economy. These may also lead to some level of chaos and disorder. Now, let's come back to the Belt and Road Initiative. If China can purely pursue the economic benefits brought by the Belt and Road and achieve real cooperation with neighbouring countries through mutual trust and understanding, then it will truly be a good way to broaden the road to peace and development. The economic investment that involves too much political interest will be vulnerable and result in more unnecessary rumours. Thank you for your time and continuous support. Please stay tuned and click the subscribe button below.